This last piece is actually a poem that I wrote not too long ago. I wrote this poem. I started it months and months and months ago, and I got to this point where I just could not write anymore, and it made me so mad. It drove me crazy. I wrote the first 2 parts, and I stopped. I couldn't write anymore, and I had gotten back from a trip to North Carolina, and I was running on just such little sleep, and I felt exhausted. I was just tired, all sorts of tired, and I realized that day that when you're running out of energy, that when you're kind of running on zero, you become more dependent on the Spirit to fill you, and you become dependent on the Spirit to move you through the day and to get you going and get you started. And that's what I realized that day, because after not sleeping, I drove through the night, and then I had class all day. But during class, I wrote this poem. I didn't pay attention to class. But kids that are here, pay attention to school, okay? Pay attention. But no, so this poem is for a lot of people, and I had a lot of people on my heart when I wrote this. It's a poem called Become a Poet, and I'll just get right into it. I watched the rain fall from my bedroom window a couple of weeks ago. I thought of the goodness that it brings, the power and growth of its revitalizing qualities. Then I thought to myself that nobody would care to hear these things, and so not a single word was spoken. And later that day, I stepped onto the bus, and I slid through the crowd of people who were grateful from the shelter for the clouds, and I heard an angry voice behind me, so I turned around. What I witnessed was a girl my age. She was in tears, while the boy facing her collapsed her confidence to the floor in fear. The words that I heard spoken that day are words I would never say, but I did nothing but listen to her abuser justify himself in self-righteousness. I hid behind my own subconscious, telling myself that it's not my place to change the situation she's been placed in. And later that day, I heard a story. I heard a story about a little boy who was bullied at school, inside the 4 walls that were promised to be safe for him to be who he was created to be, but instead he feels small. You see, this little boy is smaller than most his age. He's got trouble making friends, but he loves to be on stage, and so the other kids are creative enough to make up names to categorize and stereotype him as he begins to feel ashamed and sorry for who he is. Words thrown can hurt a child much more than sticks or stones. We know this. The boy tries so hard to ignore it. He tries so hard to hold on to the hope that he knows, but he begins to feel smaller and smaller and smaller. So the light becomes cold. The light in his eyes simmers down to a smidgen of its former beauty, and he becomes more and more timid while accepting that what the world says around him is true. And because he feels small, he goes home alone with a few more scrapes and bones bruised, scared and confused. And because he feels small, he goes home and not a word spoken about how he feels broken, and goes unnoticed, feeling even smaller, hurt and lonely. His parents assume he's just a quiet kid. Maybe he's not a people person, so they don't think to ask. But we tell ourselves this to shield us from the truth, irrefutable, though we refuse to believe that these problems could possibly relate to us. Maybe a little girl, too young to understand why she hears her parents fighting every night, wonders why mommy and daddy can't just get along and why everything can't just be all right. So she looks to her older brothers to see how she ought to feel about it, how she ought to feel about it all, and how she should act. But they don't seem to react to the fact that mom and dad don't love each other. Her brothers go to school every morning like nothing is wrong, and as long as nobody knows, then nothing is going on. So inside, this little girl tells herself just that this is simply how life is. This is how life ought to be. That her parents will scream and scream and scream, and she'll lose sleep, and her mind will run and run to hide from the calamity of it all. And no one was there to pick her up. Nobody was there to pick her up. No one was there to pick her up. Nobody was there to pick you up. I'm sorry, Emily, that I wasn't there to pick you up. And now I pray and I pray and I pray that God would fill the void that I left when I turned my back and let you fend for yourself. But look at you. Look at you, Emily. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. Despite the situation you've been placed in, you're stronger, and let's face it, you're more talented now than I'll ever be. You're better than the best of me, and I look back and wish that I could alter history, but the rest of me thanks God for being the strengths and that my weaknesses couldn't be. For so many years, I've been silent about the world around me, and it took me becoming a poet for these words to be spoken, so become a poet. Don't let another moment pass that you might look back on and wish that you had spoken. Become a poet. Because words are useless left alone in your head. And there are lives at stake. So stand up and let your voice be heard. Let those words be said. This world is broken. The world needs our help. Our children are bullied, little girls neglected, and boys rejected. The world is oppressive until we stand up and defend the helpless. Raise your voices. Our expressions could end it. Open your arms and shed it. Shed the darkness from the meek and become a poet for those who are too afraid to speak. We are blessed so that we can bless. We are loved so that we may love. His love deserves to be spread, so spread it. Spread love. Thank you guys very much for being here. I know an hour-long acoustic show can be